and welcome to Where We're At. I'm Rebecca Rankin, and my co-host is...
I'm Lana Ogilvie. Hey, Rebecca, so where are you at?
You and I have talked about this a lot, but I am going to ask you, have you ever had that kind of feeling of this puzzling? Maybe your life is feeling very repetitive. Maybe there's a certain futility to it. I hate to say this, but maybe sometimes really is all of this worth it? What's going on? Isn't there more than this? And I think for me, sometimes it gets around to this idea of disappointments, right? It just is what it is. And I'm a little bit disappointed in different things.
Yeah. The constant disappointment.
You and I've talked about this. And so it's become one of those things that I feel super curious about, right?
So knowing all of this and that so many of us have these same feelings, we have today with us, our guest is Sarah Brokaw.
Love her.
She's a licensed psychotherapist and a certified professional coach with a private practice in Los Angeles.
Sarah is also the New York Times bestselling author of Fortytude, Making the Next Decades the Best Years of Your Life through the 40s, 50s, and beyond. She's here to talk to us about midlife malaise and share some ideas that can help alleviate or at least manage all of these feelings. Hey, Sarah, thank you for coming to talk to us about midlife malaise. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Sarah, so it's so great to see you. I wanted to just tell you up right from the beginning. So your book, Fortytude, can I tell you that was the inspiration for me and Rebecca even doing this? We have been talking for more than 10 years about doing something like this.
Well, yeah. But now when I just reread the book and I'm thinking, God, I was such a baby. When I bought the I wasn't even pregnant. I didn't even know what menopause really meant. Kind of laughed at the concept. And here we are.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. But I do think that book has got lots of valuable information. It's, and I'm realizing, as Lana's saying, that it's that idea of setting yourself up the same way that, people have managers, whether you're a sports figure or entertainment or any kind of business person, they've got a plan, right? And I said, we need plans. We need a plan.
It's also, if you think about, our parents' generation, if we're lucky enough to have our moms still be alive, the way that they looked at midlife was so drastically different from the way that we look at our midlives.
It wasn't something that was talked about. And I think that's one of the things, that we wanted to discuss with you, that this should actually be normalized, having this conversation about it, because it was kind of almost a shameful thing. My mother also never talked about this stage of life.
Sarah, can you describe, when we're talking about that, I'd love to get a perspective from a professional on what you see in practice. And obviously you are a woman in your 50s as well now too. So you've got some personal experience with this, but what are you seeing in practice with, your clients and people who are coming in, and what are you hearing from your friends about, this idea of it's not, and I want to be very clear, we're not talking about clinical depression, and those people definitely need to go and get, go to a doctor, see a person, get some help. Trust me, I have been there. There's situational depression about particular circumstances that you really need extra help with. What we want to talk to you today about is this general feeling. It's a little bit of maybe some disappointment. Is this all there is? Am I doing everything right? Maybe some stressors. Can you talk a little bit about that in your practice? How do you define that?
The majority of clients that I have right now are individuals like ourselves, where they suddenly, and it's not just women, it's also men, where they suddenly kind of question, it's like an existential crisis. It's like an existential crisis in mass, right? It's who am I? What am I? I was working so hard for what exactly? Partly, I think that was also COVID that kind of expedited that existential crisis. That's what I really believe, because we were all forced to be at home to reflect upon everything. COVID passes, right? People are still, knock on wood, are in their 50s, the Gen X, where a few things are coming up. One is, if I could talk about the physical aspects, right? the physical aspects for women, which we talk about frequently amongst ourselves, amongst other women. But what I'm hearing it from in my practice is obviously it's kind of like the flatness. I'm just talking like, it's like
You mean
what
the flatness of my behind? Is that what you're talking about?
that could be it.
That's a big
Well,
part
let's
of
talk. Well, that's the other thing. I mean, let's be real here, though. In Los Angeles, it is the obsession with how women's bodies are changing, and I say change. Other women may say decaying, and so what's happened now, and this is where it becomes a pathology that a lot of women think, should I go on Ozempic? Because the way that I was in my 30s and early 40s and 40s, I can no longer have that body. And they get angry at themselves. They get, angry at the life stage that they're at.
Because of the societal pressures that I mean, especially somewhere like LA where everything's based on that, but certainly our whole this particular Western society might be different in other parts of the world, but is very much based for a woman on fitness, shape, thinness, all these kind of unattainable things.
Well, I think that's right. So it's like if you are not measuring up, then what happens that I've noticed, and I say this a lot to my female clients, suddenly you feel like wherever you are in that social hierarchy, you're now on the bottom because of your age and because of how your body's responding to your age.
Yeah, right. Which is all natural. And it's slightly crazy because you cannot turn back the clock. We cannot drug ourselves, eat ourselves, exercise ourselves out, plastic surgery ourselves out of this very normal and quite honestly should be embraced stage, right?
And it is frustrating. Like I'm certainly not trying to go back to the shape I was in my 20s, and I exercise and do heavy weights. And I did an exercise the other day, and I was dead. I was dead at the end of this exercise because I was using the 20. I need to go and get some 15-pound weights. I had 220 pounds, whatever. I was dead. And I remember just thinking, oh my God, I'm so old. Like I would have been able to do that so easily. And then the woman had burpees at the end. I was like, I want to kill you right now. Like what? Yeah. I was like, I'm trying to stay there, but it's still at the same time, even though I know there's the realistic benchmarks, it's, the disappointment because there's all this stuff coming at you. The disappointment's real.
And it's like, who are we measuring up to? Right. So in response, when I'm hearing this from women, what I ask them is, okay, if you were to think about a woman who you would like to emulate, a woman who is, 60s, 70s and beyond, someone who really stands out for you as the exemplar of Fortytude 2.0 is what I call it. And when they ask me and when they can't come up with anyone, the person I say is Gloria Steinem. Gloria has not had an ounce of plastic surgery. She doesn't make that much money. Her greatest currency is not only her intelligence and her grit, but it's also her unbelievable sense of humor. And the woman is now like 88 years old. Right? So I feel like that's what's really important. And also, not only that, her voice is obviously really loud and clear. Her messaging is very loud and clear. So at what point do we not necessarily use our bodies or our looks to send the message? Right. In my sessions, I always say there's so much room to be so many things.
Yeah. And don't forget that. Don't box yourself in.
Do not box yourself in.
So, as a psychotherapist and you're working with individuals, but also with couples, and you touched on this, that men are also going through some of the changes, even though women, we have this name, menopause, and we're talking about all these hormonal changes and these body changes and, these feelings, can you talk about how hormonal shifts affect men and what your advice is for couples, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, it's also, it's advice not just to couples, but to men when I see them as individuals, right? So A lot of times couples will come in, middle-aged couples, and the man will say, well, my wife doesn't really want to have as much sex because she has her various reasons, right? The vaginal dryness, her estrogen is lower, so she doesn't have the sex drive, goes on and on and on. We all know what the symptoms are. And then there are times though where a man will say, I just been really tired. I've been really, really tired, right? Or, I just don't understand why I just somehow 8 years ago I was able to eat so much. And now why am I getting this little guts? Right. Or they're becoming preoccupied with their hair loss. Or why is it that they can't sustain an erection? Right. Everything that they do, they're too embarrassed to share amongst their friends, that then they're looking at me as a female therapist and like, how in the world am I going to share this with a female therapist? But because I love doing my own research, I discovered that there's something called andropause, which is when men starting at 46 and over, their hormones, testosterone goes down, estrogen goes up. And at some point, their hormonal levels are exactly where our hormonal levels are. So the playing field is level.
Interesting.
People don't talk about that, right?
At all. You do not talk about it. It's fascinating to me. So when I bring that up, it's kind of like the light bulb goes off, like, oh, right. And then what I say to couples, like, now it's a conversation you both need to have with each other. Not pathologize. There's nothing wrong with either one of you. It just means that you have the privilege of aging. There's a privilege to aging.
Yeah.
And this is part of it. If it were in the 1900s, a lot of us would be dead.
Yes.
But we're not. Right? So I'm like, then how do you capitalize?
Five vaginas instead.
Yes, we do.
Oh my God.
And we wear glasses. We've got flat asses.
And I do not have a flat ass. Okay, I don't. So I'm not going to take that one.
Okay.
It's flatter.
Flat chest I might have, but not a flat ass.
So let's just say I had the couple that come in, right? And I just did this yesterday with the couple where, I say, instead of getting mad at the other person, right? Pointing the finger at the other person, saying that's the person's fault. Because that person reacted this certain way, I'm going to do this, right? I said, okay, let's first just acknowledge that it's a privilege that we're at the age that we are at, right? And knowing that there hasn't been any significant health issues or any type of crises that we've all had to contend with. Like I'm talking about like big life crisis, right? So then what I do is I have them get a piece of paper and I have them divide it up into columns, right? So the first column is also like the date. Let's just say it's January 9th. And then the second column would be mindfulness. And in that mindfulness, it's about either doing breath work. It could be meditation on your own. It could be listening to a mindfulness app like Headspace. It could just be taking a walk, but something that requires at least 2 minutes of just being focused on your breath and being focused on nothing else. Like don't put your phone away, put your laptop away, and just doing that. Sometimes it helps to walk. And I always say walk and then pause and say it out loud. Walk and then pause. That's mindfulness. And it really can be such a short amount of time. And if you have more time, great. Do as long as you want. So that's the second column. Then the third column, I'm basically going back to basics. Water intake. As we know, in midlife for women, the amount of water that we have in our body significantly decreases. That's why we can't consume as much alcohol as we've been able to in the past. Right.
An aha moment.
Right. Exactly. So then that's the third column, which is like, can you really do 64 ounces of water or more? Big one. Then the fourth column, which is deliberate cold water exposure.
Right. You mentioned that, like going, like you said, we didn't have to go the full Wim Hof, but kind of.
No, you don't. You start off, and a lot of times I'll hear people say, well, I hate cold water. I can't stand cold water, or I'm not going to go in, to a lake or into the ocean. I'm not going to
go skinny dip at Coney Island with a polar bear.
Right.
She always gets back to skinny dipping. She always goes to skinny dipping this way.
Always back to skin, taking off my clothes.
So Sarah, when you say that, can I do that in the shower, the cold water?
That's the point. Yes.
Okay.
So all you do is you go in, right? Let's just say you do your normal shower. Let's just say it's like all like you're nice and soupy and it's a nice warm water. Then the last starting off 30 seconds, you turn it all the way to cold. What you're going to notice is catching your breath, but you want that. That's exactly what you want, because what you're doing, your body is basically preparing you, right, to be exposed to whatever's going to come your way. But there's also been so many studies done with scientific evidence shows that your dopamine goes up, your serotonin goes up 30 seconds.
Well, I did used to do that when I was younger, like when I was like 20, because I had an apartment in the West Village that had no air conditioning. It was like the parlor level. Literally, there was a bus stop outside my house. It was 1,000 degrees that whole summer in New York. So I'd go to the deli on the corner, buy 2 bags of ice, put them in the bathtub, and do a cold soak before I went to bed. Otherwise, I was too hot.
So you did. But you just did
but it was
it.
100 degrees then. Like, this is like 0.
Now she has air conditioning. She doesn't need to do it anymore.
Okay, that's one. But 2, this is why you need to do it.
Okay, I like that, because we can all do that at home, right? Like, that's not impossible, right?
Yeah. Okay. So then I think that was the 4th column. And then I think the 5th column is I call it a thought dump. Write down everything that you are avoiding, not just about the cold water exposure, but it could be something about, have I really written that check for real estate taxes? Did I really call back my dear friend where we've had a falling out? Have I gone to the doctor to really see where my blood pressure level is at? I'm just talking about whatever comes up, right? That's the column. And that you attack one of those per week. It doesn't have to be all at once.
So don't procrastinate on the things that you kind of stop procrastinating.
Well, and if you do, right. So and if you do, and it's really important, it's just note it. Don't judge it, just note it. Just say, what's coming up for me? Why am I avoiding this? Right? So it's just really about, and remember that this little thing that I give to my clients, both men and women, it's optional. But people thrive off of structure. We need routine.
Okay, are there more columns?
Oh yeah, you can go on forever. The next column is connect with someone once a week, right? We are social beings. There's also been so many studies done that people who do not socialize, who tend to isolate as they get older, have a greater risk of dementia.
What about money? Because I think that's a stress point for a lot of us.
Once again, that could be another column, which is write down each day, what is my relationship with money? And notice if it's changed. Has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? What is it about money? Is it that you really are in debt? If you are in debt, how are you going to approach it? If you're in a relationship and you're not having a constructive dialogue with your partner or your spouse about it, why is that? The third one could be when you're spending money. It's funny to say this because I think that 20-something-year-olds, struggle with this. Am I spending money because I am really trying to fill something in? I'm trying to fill a hole in my life. Or is it that I just simply want to spend money? It goes back though to the existential crisis, where I've noticed there are 2 extreme responses I've noticed in COVID. There were people who I was treating where they were spending all the money because they're like, it doesn't matter, it's the end of life. End of the world anyways. We're all going to die from COVID. And then the other response was they were hoarding everything. Right. And even if COVID has waned, people still have that mentality.
Okay, so you get somebody to put all these columns out, and you're describing them, and then so are people visiting this on a daily basis, weekly basis? What do you suggest?
All right, I think it's really about how their brain works. Some people may even say, I don't work with columns. It could be a pie chart. It could be just writing down. It doesn't matter. The way that I operate is with columns, right? I'm just giving you like an example. But really, the message to them is you are your own agent. You can take care of yourself. And let's see how you feel if you were to do this for yourself on a daily basis. Note it when you don't.
So once you kind of like put it to paper, you see the reality of what's going on in your head.
Yes, we're all dealing with this. You know, the privilege of aging is that we've done so much, but now we have the privilege of really taking care of ourselves.
And I think that a lot of people forget that. Like, you know, it's a real privilege to age, but it's become so ingrained in this particular society, you know, like you live for your work and your work's everything and your job and you're having your house and paying the mortgage and no, and you need it. And it, like, you kind of lose sight of the fact that there's a whole life outside of just money and paying your bills. And how do we, because if it was fuller, or if it was more balanced in the relationship of all these different aspects, perhaps we wouldn't have as much of this kind of, you know, bummed outed feeling as much, you know?
Right. Or this is the generalized anxiety about where we fit in.
I think also what you're both saying to me is we're trained to be very goal oriented. Start a project, get to the end, here's the goal. What I think, Sarah, you're telling me is I need to enjoy that process, right? I need to enjoy the process of just living as opposed to always like goal. Enjoy what I'm doing, enjoy, you know, and get things done. But there's a process to everything, right? So
there's a process and you don't need to enjoy it. There can be, you don't. There can be days in which you can know, be like, oh, that was really easy for me to do my mindful, right? It was really easy today for me to do my mindfulness. You know, so I sat in my chair for 8 minutes and wow, it flew. Yesterday, I couldn't stand it.
Right.
What was gratifying though, was that I did have the privilege of those 8 minutes.
Right. To do something for yourself. Yeah.
Do something for myself.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
I guess what the lesson is, number one, we are not crazy for feeling like, wow, having these feelings like this again.
God, no.
And then, you know, two, there are ways around it. And there's lots of action plans, you know, put these things in place, these strategies. And I guess number three, if it's super serious, you need to seek professional help and get some.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that the world is so complicated. It's so complicated. And we know that it can be so scary. I always say that change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Choose wisely.
Okay, so wow. I mean,
she was great.
Wow, what she just said. Like, that was so great. She had so much, like, just amazing information.
You know what? I always love people who work in mental health and therapists who have these takeaways, right? Who give you an active, you know, something constructive that you have to do, an exercise that's going to help with where you're at.
Right. And so for you, what was your favorite takeaway?
Oh my gosh, so many. But I have to say, I think this idea of shame, it's something that I struggle with. This sort of shame, like, why am I getting hot flashes? Why am I up in the middle of the night? Why am I doing this? Why am I feeling down this day? Well, you know, why is it, no matter how much exercise I do, my body is just kind of my body. And I just have to accept everything. And there's no shame in it. It's just, you know, we need to understand this is just, as she said, the privilege of getting older.